MPs are locked in an angry debate.
The breath taker, I produce aka the Undertaker. You want to come down to the...
Well, not people want to restrict the size of a shrine.
There's a world just beyond the edges of what most people hear. A world where cultures are formed and laws are broken. For years, pirate radio stations defied the rules in order to share something different. But over time, their signal began to fade. What happened to these stations? What happened to pirate radio? In the age of on-demand streaming, it's hard to imagine a time when terrestrial broadcasts ruled. The idea of tuning in blind to a TV station to see what's on has become completely alien to modern audiences. In the 1960s, the UK's highly regulated radio broadcasts aimed to appease the musical taste of the country as a whole, ultimately leaving those seeking a more diverse and underground music in the dark. So they decided to broadcast for themselves. In 1964, the waves from an illegal and unregulated form of audio broadcasting began to drift ashore. Actual ships anchored around the UK began broadcasting pop music to the masses. With a manifesto in favour of the new and exciting, Radio Caroline became the first pirate radio station in the UK.
This is Radio Caroline on 199 meters, your all-day music station, Britain's first commercial radio station. My name's Tom Lodge, your disc jockey for the next hour.
The unbelievable popularity of these nautical disc jockeys proved that the people were willing to listen, with well over half of the population of the UK tuning into the pirates on a daily basis. This amount of free expression was of course an outrage to the regulatory branches of the UK government, and as such, the pirate radio stations of the 60s were quickly shut down by the Marine Offences Act of 1967. Despite this, the unavoidable noise they made started a chain reaction that would echo down throughout the remainder of the millennium. BBC Radio 1 was 1967's answer to the pirate radio problem, and as far as the government were concerned, they had fixed the issues cried out by the British youth. The young people, however, had other ideas. While rock and pop music were finally being transmitted on legitimate radio stations, the sonic landscape of the 1980s was distinctly white. There was a total lack of representation for black voices and black music on the radio. So once again, the people turned to breaking the law for their passion. During a time of mass unemployment and social unrest, the country was being encouraged to go out and earn a living for themselves. This apparent DIY attitude being preached by Thatcher's government, combined with a shift in the affordability of broadcasting equipment, seemed to reignite the spark started in the 60s. You no longer needed a large boat and thousands of pounds worth of equipment. All was needed was a tower block and a transmitter. The first real pirate radio station founded by black people that played black music was the Dread Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as the DBC.
By having a black music station, it enables you to play music that would never ever be played on the radio. It would never be heard publicly, so it gives that musician a chance. It gives young black music labels a chance to get promotion.
The DBC is the first example of pirate radio being used in the UK to foster a sense of community. The popularity and evident importance of the DBC showed what was truly possible. This second wave of pirate radio exploded across the country, with Kiss FM and London Weekend Radio becoming the most prolific and most professional. Stations began using multiple transmitters across London, allowing them to keep broadcasting without the fear of the station coming off air. As one location would get raided, the signal would switch instantaneously to a different tower, and the Department of Trade and Industry were back to square one. This of course led to the development of better techniques to fight against the urban pirates. The DTI were also given power to legally seize all equipment associated with the stations, including their most prized assets, the records.
I was scared of that happening. And I probably was so mad about music in them days. If someone did burst in, no one's ever seen me fight, I'd probably fight for my albums. I probably would, I'd take some licks.
By 1986, community radio station licenses were beginning to get offered up to those who promised to shut down illegal operations. This ended up disappointing most of the pirates though, as allegations surfaced that the government had manipulated the licensing process to favour certain broadcasters aligned with its political agenda, sidelining more independent and community-focused applicants. Naturally, the pirates went on broadcasting illegally. It wasn't until 1990 that stations like Kiss FM would eventually be granted official licenses and become legitimate stations. This was far from the end of the pirate radio revolution. It continued to thrive well into the 90s and became lovingly intertwined with the rave scene. Illegal broadcasting had become instrumental in the creation of whole genres, acid house, hardcore, jungle and garage being the most prominent to emerge at this time. Undeterred by a continued onset of raids and shutdowns by the DTI, by 1995 there were 60 pirate radio stations in London alone, and more than 600 across the rest of the country. Cool FM and Rude FM were amongst the most popular stations. They had developed from simply playing songs into a space that delivered full performances on a daily basis, with the role of the MC becoming increasingly important. MCs were no longer simple radio hosts. Their role had blossomed into that of the frontman. The pirate radio scene was quickly turning into a platform for young people to express themselves honestly. As more and more stations sprung up, the music itself continued to evolve. Rinse FM is heralded as one of the UK's most important pirate stations. Starting off with a UK garage focus, Rinse would go on to be one of the main platforms that gave Grime its audience. Rinse, along with other notable stations like Freeze, Deja Vu and Heat FM, found themselves operating at the centre of the biggest cultural movement in the UK since punk. Without pirate radio, it's unclear whether a movement like Grime would have even been possible.
No matter what happens, you can't ever forget pirate radio station, because to be honest with me, none of the shit that I've done would have been able to go as far without pirate radio station.
Incessant attempts to quell the creative fire that was burning in East London may have been successful if it wasn't for the pirates. For 50 years, pirate radio provided for the people what the government could not. What it all comes down to is communication, and pirate radio was a way to communicate. The rise of the internet brought more communication to everyone than anyone could have ever imagined. So naturally, the abundance of pirate radio stations began to decline. People in the UK no longer need to risk their lives to perform and listen to the music that is important to them. With services like YouTube springing into action, the ability to directly reach an audience has become easier than ever. Online radio stations exist too. Noods, Resonance Extra, Crop, Foundation FM, Slack City, and many more broadcast the latest in sonic culture every single day. Although disputed by some, it's easy to see online radio as the natural progression from pirate radio. They're often community-based and exist to bring otherwise inaccessible music, stories, and ideas to the people, just like their illegal older cousins. They carry with them that same energy and anarchist spirit that pirate radio brought to the country. The continued idea, started by pirate radio, represents a total freedom of expression in an era that feels increasingly expressionless. Today, pirate and online radio stations are used as a potent tool to fight injustice all across the world. Radio Al-Hara is a Palestinian online radio station that transmits music, shares stories, and creates a space for debate. The station came to prominence with its Sonic Liberation Front campaign, aligning itself with the protests surrounding the Sheikh Jarrah controversy. They champion international movements for self-determination, shining a spotlight on the civil and human rights struggles of Palestinians under Israeli occupation. The name itself translates to neighbourhood radio, reflecting its intention to make a community-led space for people to share their thoughts. This modern iteration of pirate radio underscores the enduring power of independent media, showing that the fight for self-determination and human rights transcends borders and continues to resonate all across the globe. This video is titled "What Happened to Pirate Radio?" and the answer is nothing. It may not be the same as it was before, but it's still here and it's still as important as it ever was. You can still tune into them if you live within range, and of course you can listen to online radio. It defies culture, and above all else, it brings people together. This is a huge topic to cover in just one video, and quite honestly, each era could have had its own video. So if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics, then I'm going to leave a list of some videos that I think you might find useful. Also going to link to a book that I think is super relevant. It's about sound art performance. It's done through the medium of a pirate broadcast. I'm also going to link to all the online stations that I mentioned, as well as a website that has all the frequencies for real active pirate radio stations in the UK. But, you know, listen to that at your own peril. Let me know if there's any topics you want me to cover in future videos. That could be cool. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.